Welcome to Crazy Not Crazy, podcast on bipolar disorder. So, let's start this off. Bipolar disorder. A lot of people have heard of it. Not many people know what it is. Not many people know a lot about mental health illnesses or illnesses in general. I hope that with this podcast and the episodes to come, that I can enlighten some people, let them know what's up, what isn't up. Let's go ahead and talk about what bipolar disorder is. So it's marked by manic phases that may last weeks or months, followed by depressive phases that also last weeks or months. The manic phase might last for 2 weeks and depressive for 4. It doesn't always have to be equal and even. A lot of the time, for me at least, I wouldn't really know how long each phase would last. My manic phases would last anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, whenever it wanted to. Depressive phases, about 2 or 3, but it felt like an eternity. In the manic phases, you're less likely to sleep, have a lot of energy, and even if you sleep 2-3 hours, you feel amazing. You feel like you can still tackle anything, take on the world. You feel like a superhero, really. You lose touch with reality, too. I definitely hallucinated a lot. I still hallucinate. We'll talk about that in a second. But depressive episodes, it is what it sounds like. It's depression, but on another level, really. There's bipolar disorder 1 and 2. I have bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 is a little bit more extreme. So you have manic phases where you're off the wall entirely, mood swings, you spend a ton of money, you're delusional, you've got racing thoughts. The difference between type 1 and type 2 is that mania. In type 2, you have hypomania. So you're still all over the place, you're still bouncing off the walls, but it's less, it's not to the extent that it is with bipolar 1. So imagine you have a gallon of milk and a half gallon of milk. The gallon of milk is a whole lot of milk. In this case, for this metaphor, it's a whole lot of crazy. For the half gallon, you still got some crazy. It's definitely there, but it's not to the extent. I apologize for my use of crazy if that offends anyone, if it triggers anyone. I myself am crazy, so if that helps, if not, again, I'm sorry. So I knew that something was up with me. Well, first off, I also have ADHD. And I was diagnosed ADHD pretty early on, maybe early middle school. And I was also diagnosed with depression when I was about 14 or 15. I still think it's funny how I've got those two diagnoses and no one thought about bipolar disorder. But anyway, so I knew there was something really different when I would overreact to things, and my parents would point out that I would overreact, and I didn't see it or I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to change it. I would cry about it, and I couldn't figure out why I was crying, especially in situations where I'd be corrected. That was always a big thing. I never took criticism well. I would cry every single time. But it wasn't until maybe senior year of high school, freshman year of college even, that I started to see, looking back, that I would lose friends. They would just kind of drop like flies at how unpredictable I was at the time. And it wasn't until then that I realized that my behavior wasn't fitting in with a social norm. College hit, and I transferred colleges. I used to go to college in Pennsylvania. Now I'm in Colorado. And at this new college, I went to therapy just because growing up, went to a few different therapists, maybe 4 or 5. And this therapist, I was starting over my life story, like you have to with a new person, a new therapist. You have to let them know what's up. And so I was telling her a little bit about myself, and she's asking questions, and I'm answering them honestly. And in our first session, she goes, I think you might be bipolar. And I partially was blown away, but I called it when I was 14, freshman year of high school. One of my teachers pulled me out of the classroom. I was being disruptive, and she wanted me to explain myself, my behavior, and I told her I'm bipolar. And I didn't really understand what it meant at the time, and I don't know why I said it, and I don't know why it came into my mind, but I think it's funny that I called it. And so this therapist said, give me another session. We'll go over it a little bit more, ask some more questions. We'll talk about you. We'll figure out what's going on. Our time was up at that point, so I said, okay. We made another appointment. I came back the next week, and that's when I was diagnosed. And that was a year ago on the 7th, October 7th, 2017. This year has been a roller coaster. Getting over the stigma is really difficult. I'm sure anyone who's newly diagnosed can tell you that you don't really know who you are anymore. And sure, you're the same person that you've always been, that you've known, because it's you, but it feels like there's an extension of you that you have to lug around now. That stigma is just so powerful. It really gets in the way of being able to digest the information that you were just given. So, following that therapy appointment, I was given a medication for depression, an antidepressant. Now, looking back and knowing what I know now, you're not supposed to give someone that's bipolar an antidepressant, because what it does is it brings your mood up from that low that it's trying to prevent. It brings your mood up to a normal level for other people. But because there's also mania or hypomania in bipolar 2, it throws you straight up into an episode because you already have those highs. So the medication really doesn't help at all. So I took the meds. I was on it for maybe 2 or 3 days, and then I woke up on a Sunday and I felt crazy. I don't like to describe myself as crazy. Sometimes I'll joke around with it with close friends, but that's very rare. I felt crazy. I woke up and I climbed down out of my bunk bed and I ran and looked at myself in the mirror in the bathroom, and there were 3 of me. There were 2 on each side, right behind each of my shoulders, and we were all wearing the same thing. We all had a similar voice, same voice, but they had different personalities. It was almost like an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. I actually wrote a paper about this. If anyone wants this paper to read over, I can get that out to you. But I felt the need to run. I convinced myself that I had to cover every inch of the floor with my footprints, but they couldn't overlap, and I had to cover every inch of the room. I had to figure it out as I went along. There's indents in the room where the closets are, and I had to figure it out. And as I'm doing this, I stop. and something tells me to go sit on my roommate. I was in a dorm at this point, at my roommate's bed, but I had to do it in such a way that I didn't touch the edges of the mattress because I was allergic to corners. I couldn't align with any corners. They couldn't, if you were to draw a line from the corner outward, I could not be in the path of any of those lines. It was wild. My mind was racing. I was talking to myself out loud, but I thought it was inside. And while this is happening, I've got people on each side of my shoulder telling me what to do. They told me that I had to decide. I was the only person in the world who could figure out if the suitcase that was in the corner or the refrigerator was the true shade of black. Now, this was an insane decision for me. I thought about this for many minutes because they were both cheating. The suitcase was navy blue, but in the shadows in the corner, it looked black. The refrigerator was black, but it was shiny. It was a shiny black. Somehow, however I came up with my decision, I decided to give the suitcase the trophy. I went over, I awarded the suitcase the trophy, I congratulated it. The fridge was livid. I couldn't go in that fridge all day. I had to make it up to the fridge. I was so convinced that this fridge would not open for me if I went over to it. I don't know if it would yell at me, if it would turn away whenever I got close, but I stayed away from that refrigerator the entire day. I ate nothing out of that fridge. It was at this point that I kind of realized I shouldn't be alone. So I called up a couple of friends. I called up 3 friends, and all 3 came over. Great people. Shout out to them. And so they come over. One eventually takes me out to eat because I hadn't eaten all day. This episode went on for a good 4 or 5 hours. 4 hours or 3 or 4 hours before they showed up. And then it went on for another hour or so. And when they showed up, I remember them trying to refocus all of my energy. And I had the idea to do origami. And there were only 2 things I knew how to do. I could make a crane and I could make a little purse. And so I decided to teach them first how to make the purse and then how to make the crane that would go into the purse. So we're doing origami, and throughout I'm screaming, just little interjections here or there. I laugh a few times. You know, my friends kind of looked at each other. This is all of their first time meeting each other, all 3 of them. And they handled it like champs. So we went through the origami. I ran around a little bit. Funny enough, one of my friends, the second one to arrive, I felt him coming down the hall. And I opened the door, I threw it open as he put his fist up to knock. It was the funniest thing. I think it was funny at least. But I grabbed him by his shirt and pulled him into the room, looked around the hall, and slammed the door. I never introduced any of them. They all introduced themselves. But the next day, I happened to have therapy, and I went to my therapist, and I told her what happened, and I just thought it was the most bizarre thing, you know? I'd never had anything like that big before. I'd had episodes before, like once when I was about 14 or 15, I was convinced that I read in the steam in the shower that the droplets formed a picture that let me know that I was going to die that day, and the only people that could save me were firefighters, but I couldn't tell the firefighters. I don't know. Anyway, I tell my therapist about this episode, and she puts me in a mental hospital. Rightly so. Definitely justified. But I just couldn't believe that she would do that to me. I was so hurt. So my roommate at the time packed my bag, did a wonderful job packing. She's one of my best friends. And my uncle had to drive an hour from the next city over to take me to this hospital. So I get there, I get checked in. It was a pretty quick process, honestly. I was pretty surprised. And I was terrified. I had a huge meltdown when I got there. They had to medicate me. It definitely did calm me down, but I just hated that it got to that point, you know? I felt like I couldn't control myself. I was completely out of control. And as the week went on, I was there for 7 days. As the week went on, it really wasn't that bad of an experience. We had group therapy, we had activities every day. This awesome guy would come and we'd play bingo. And we could win prizes. Everything from deodorant to seek and find books, stuffed animals. The only stuffed animals you were allowed to have were the ones that you won at bingo. And I won a teddy bear, and I was so excited. I don't remember what I named him, but I was pumped, you know? But the place wasn't too bad. You couldn't see out of the windows. There were only 2 clocks in the entire place. You were able to walk around at whatever hour, whenever you wanted. It was a pretty short hallway, maybe 30 feet, if that, 20, 30 feet. There was a day room that was locked after a certain hour, but you could pace the halls as much as your heart desires. Every 15 minutes, they would come and check on you. They had to take notes on you. You could get chocolate cake whenever you wanted. That was really nice. Really good chocolate cake. You'd fill out your menu for the next day. And the food was really good, actually. Really, really good. You could specify what you did and didn't want on it. Anything that said it came with gravy, please get it with gravy. You will be very sad with yourself if you don't. But yeah, so that was the first hospitalization. That was October. So the end of this month will mark a year since I've been in the mental hospital for the first time. I got out the day before Halloween. The second hospitalization was in January, and it was torturous. Oh my goodness. The people were different. I mean, of course, because everyone's only staying there 1 or 2 weeks. The people were difficult to deal with. And I'm pretty sure that's really what made it. But I don't know what it was. I couldn't stand being there. I was so angry. I was ready to argue with anybody. But I had my uncle that drove to take me the first time. He came to visit a few times, and I really looked forward to that. That was really nice. The first time I went to the hospital, I had a few friends visit as well. That was really great. Helped me a lot. But between the 2 hospitalizations, they had me on and off maybe 13 different pills. Oh my gosh. I was on and off a lot of different meds. One of them I slept for 22 hours. It was not where it's at. But they've gotten the meds right now, and I'm on lithium, Lamictal, and Abilify. So Abilify and lithium are both antipsychotics, and Lamictal treats seizures. It also treats bipolar, but it's also given for seizures. There are a lot of meds out there that do a few things. I have a friend that is on meds for schizophrenia, but, since it's an antipsychotic, it helps with both. Even with the meds, though, I'm definitely in a much better place. A year later, I've gone from being afraid of myself to being proud of myself. And I can't even tell you how great that feels. I still hallucinate, though, auditory as well as visual. It's never anything crazy. I mean, to some people, hearing that I hallucinate scares the life out of them. I understand. But I've had this as long as I can remember. Before I was diagnosed with anything, before I noticed anything different about myself, I always hallucinated. The one that I remember having the earliest was It sounded like someone would come up behind me and like whisper scream my name into my ear, and that was always awful. That one is terrifying. That's the only one that I'm really afraid of. That still happens. I hear a lot of singing, a lot of music, a lot of singing, a lot of music. A new one that's popped up is I'll hear vibrations, and I know it's not coming from my phone, but I just hear as if someone's getting a phone call even if there's no one around me. I'll also see things that can be anything. It could be something that looks like a blob of ink moving like an octopus on the ceiling. It could be, I had one where I was on the third floor of a building and I was facing a window, and it looked like there was someone walking across the windowsill on the outside of the building, straight across the building until I couldn't see them anymore. They would have fallen off the building. Things like that. It can really be anything. It happens for like a split second, so I'm able to quickly figure out that it was just a hallucination. But sometimes my boyfriend is really great about checking me on this. If I'm seeing something and I'll comment about it and kind of be upset about it or whatever it is. Like I had a friend who was eating a burrito. I thought he was dripping burrito grease everywhere, and I yelled at him for it. My boyfriend had to let me know, hey, that's not a real thing. You're okay, though. So I appreciate that. Things like that. Just wild hallucinations. I decided to join a support group. That's a new thing. Fairly new. I decided to join a support group online, and my main goal being there originally was to find people like me and get support. But now I like to give back. That's kind of my thing. There's a lot of people on there that are new or think they might be bipolar, and I like to, take them by the hand and walk them through and ask them questions and find out a little bit more and help them through these times. Because it really is very confusing. Even now, it's still hard for me to say I'm bipolar. It makes me want to cringe, almost. But this support group has definitely helped me a lot, especially being able to give back. Helps heal a part in me. I heard this quote once, be the person that you needed when you were younger. And I take that to heart for sure. I like to be that person that I needed when I was going through all of this. I went through it mostly alone a year ago. I didn't really talk to anyone about it just because I didn't have anyone to talk about it. And then when you're in your head about something, it gets messy. It's like if you have a stain on your shirt and you know it's there and you think everyone can see it and you're freaking out about it, but no one can really see it. It can drive you mad, is what I'm trying to get at. But throughout all of this, I've learned that bipolar disorder is not who you are. It's what you have. And people say that about a lot of illnesses or disorders, but it's true. It's not who you are. You don't introduce yourself as, hi, I'm bipolar. That's not on your name tag. That doesn't define you. It's something that you live with and that you deal with. And yes, you may struggle with it, but it's not who you are. And that's the most important thing to remember. We need to educate people, those of us with and without bipolar. We need to educate people on what it really is. Because one thing that always gets me is when people go, oh, the weather is being so bipolar. Things like that. If they understood what it was, more than highs and lows and unpredictability, I don't think they would say that. Next episode, we'll go over what the symptoms really are. We'll expand on that. But that gets to me. And so educating people is really big. That helps cut down on the stigma. It'll help people in the future when they get diagnosed. It'll help us be more accepted by people that we come across every day. You can do anything. People with bipolar, you can do anything. It might take a little bit longer. You might have to work a little harder. But that's another thing I figured out, is that you can do anything. So until next time, remember those last little pieces of wisdom. And I'll see you on the next episode of Crazy Not Crazy.